video is the beginning of a new chapter, Nature, Nurture, and Human Diversity. So this is covering modules 11 and 12. So this chapter is going to be kind of revisiting what we pretty much just barely touched on when in chapter 1 with nature versus nurture. So the first thing that we need to look at with nature versus nurture is the idea of genetics. This is obviously our nature side, so I do need to explain a little biology here, make sure that we're all on the same page. So first thing is that some basics about genes, okay, and I'm not talking blue genes. So chromosomes. Chromosomes are going to be the thread-like structures of DNA. Okay, these are the things you can kind of think of. We're going to talk about chromosomes, DNA, and genes. So chromosomes are kind of the big picture. Okay, big picture. These are the plans for what you are. This is including not only physical characteristics like eye color, hair color, but also behavioral characteristics can also be included in your chromosomes. Now, how many chromosomes do you have? Do you remember from biology? All right, so hopefully you answered that you get 23 from your mom and 23 from your dad. So you have a total of 46 chromosomes, but you have 23 pairs. So you may have answered 46 because you have a total of 46, or you have 23 pairs. So the picture on the left here is a picture of showing all of the 23 pairs. I did have somebody ask in class about what about disorders like, for example, Down syndrome. Down syndrome, they have an extra chromosome. Okay, that's what causes Down syndrome. Well, I should say not causes, genetic marker for Down syndrome. But there are other disorders where you will have, for example, a chromosome that's missing, and that has been linked to other disorders. Okay, but you will get 23 from your mom, 23 from your dad. They will pair up. Okay. And that will be your chromosomes. Now, you also have DNA. So within your chromosomes, you have DNA, which are the molecules with your genetic information. Then that actually makes up your chromosome. So I like this picture because if you can kind of see it, it has this picture of a chromosome over here, okay? And then it shows spiraling out of here is DNA. So it's trying to illustrate to you that within, oops, didn't want to press that, sorry. Within the chromosomes, okay, within the chromosomes, you have these double helix of the DNA, and so this is actually making up the chromosome, all right? So now within DNA, you can kind of see these tiny little letters in here, okay? These are going to be your actual genes. So this is the small parts to your DNA that occur in patterns. So, like I said, this kind of hierarchy. Chromosome, big picture. These are the big things here, okay? DNA is smaller picture, okay, that's coming in within there. And then genes is even smaller within the DNA. Or you could go vice versa, and you start with a gene, and then you move to the DNA, which is a larger picture, and bigger than that is the chromosome. Now, the thing is that with DNA is that we're going to talk about twins in class, and what you will find is that twins actually have, identical twins, I should say, identical twins have exact same DNA. Because if you think about how the difference between identical and fraternal twins are going to be twins that are a result from the mother's egg splitting in two and forming two separate babies. One egg, one sperm, they split in two. Okay? Whereas fraternal twins, you are going to have the mother releases two eggs at the same time. The father inseminates both eggs, and you have two babies from two eggs. Okay? So if you have identical twins, where they're from one egg, they're going to have the exact same DNA. Whereas if they're fraternal twins, their DNAs will be similar, but not the exact same. Fraternal twins are going to be they're going to be pretty much like regular brothers and sisters, okay? So if I took your DNA and compared it to a sibling of yours, your DNA would show similarities because you share the same parents, okay? But they would not be the exact same as compared to if you actually had an identical twin. Now, genes, you can have either active genes or inactive genes. I don't know, I think that's getting cut off by my recorder here. I apologize. It says can be either active or inactive. So active genes are going to be those things that you can actually see. They come out all the time, you know, your eye color, your hair color. For example, both of my parents have brown eyes. I have hazel eyes, okay? That's an active gene, okay? So determining that I have hazel eyes. Inactive genes are going to be those things that they're in your genetic makeup, they're in your DNA, they're in your chromosome, but they have to be triggered. They have to have a trigger to get them started. So for example, addiction. We talked about addiction could be a biological cause to addiction. So what happens is that you could have that as part of your gene, okay, but it has to be triggered, okay? For example, I have two uncles that are addicts. I already told you my brother is an addict, okay? I don't know. Maybe I have an addict gene in me. Who knows, okay? Right now I'm not an addict. So the question is that what would trigger that? Now, the thing is that it's not usually, you know, people are not like, oh, I'm not going to ever drink because, you know, as soon as I drink, I'm going to become an addict. No, that's not usually what happens. It's usually, the trigger is usually an environmental or a psychological thing that triggers it. So, for example, a trigger may be that, you know, maybe something catastrophic happens to me and, you know, it triggers my addiction gene in there, and all of a sudden I turn to the bottle, okay? Now, please remember that there's a difference, and somebody pointed this out, and I wanted to make sure that you understand this, is that there's a difference between being inactive and a recessive gene. Inactive, it's there, it just needs to be triggered. Recessive gene, okay, it's there and you can pass it on to your children, but it is not something that can be triggered. Like going back to my example of both of my parents have brown eyes, but I have hazel eyes, okay? How did I get hazel eyes if both of them have brown eyes? Well, obviously, when they passed down to me, they both had a recessive gene of hazel eyes that got passed on to me. So because hazel eyes both matched up, I have hazel eyes. If one of them had passed down a brown-eyed gene to me, then I would have brown eyes. I have a brother and a sister who both have brown eyes. So guaranteed in there that they have at least one of their genes is for brown eyes. Now, within them, they could have also gotten the recessive gene for hazel eyes, okay? And they could potentially then pass it on to their children if they chose to have children, okay? But it doesn't manifest itself in them. So hopefully that makes sense between the difference between inactive genes and a recessive gene. Okay, this is a picture of showing the chromosome. So here's our chromosome, here's our DNA, so within our chromosomes our DNA, and then these little brackets here are trying to show that these are the genes within the DNA. I know it's really small and hard to see.